Welcome to the Art of Living podcast, and today's title of Back to the Truth. What do we mean by going back to the truth? We have lost our ways in terms of the way we eat, the way we live, the way we interact with each other, and the way we process the information that is given to us from all the various sources which are competing for our attention. And sometimes we have to question that information to see whether it is truthful or not. And to join me today in the studio, well, she's not in the studio, but she is digitally, electronically with me in the studio, is Fabienne Alsing, the owner of Vibrant Naturally. And this is someone who's very, very passionate about the truth regarding the food that we eat, truth regarding the way that we live, and the truth regarding the information that is given to us and how we process it. Fabienne, welcome to our program today. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. And thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me along.
It's our great
really
pleasure
appreciate that.
It's our great pleasure to have you today. And I've certainly been looking forward to this discussion today as regards to what you are going to share with us. Although we had a very brief chat offline, and it's quite fascinating, some of the stuff that you've mentioned. And before we go into the main topic, I just want our viewers to hear a little bit about yourself as to what your background is and what is it that you are most passionate about.
Okay, so I'll give you an introduction about my journey and my ethos. Right since I was a little girl, I have always asked questions. I probably wasn't totally aware of my spiritual side as a little girl, but I always knew the truth inside myself. And when something didn't feel right, I always asked. I questioned it, and sometimes that could get me into trouble because not everybody else did that, and not everybody else understood that. But during this podcast, what I would like to suggest to you all is to totally put aside for an hour or however long we are speaking together, all your beliefs and your conditioning, and just listen and feel within. Don't take anything that I try and say to you. Don't take it for a fact. Just do your own listening within, do your own research, and check things out for yourself, both within and without. That's really important. So, my story is that I grew up in Norway, where I did my schooling, and I did a 4-year degree as a musician. I was a trombone player, classical trombone player, at the Music Conservatoire of Oslo. And then I moved to London when I was 22 years old to do a postgrad at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. But halfway through that postgrad, I also changed direction at the same time. So I did two things at the same time for a year. And then I started studying acupuncture. I got really fascinated with acupuncture. I'd been having some treatment, and it was just fascinating me up in Leamington Spa in the Midlands. So I finished my second year at the Guildhall, and then I moved up to the Midlands, where I completed my initial acupuncture training in 1988. And then later on, while I was practicing, I took another 4 years. So in total I did 7 years training in acupuncture to a master's level, and got my master's in 1994. And as well as this, practicing and doing my acupuncture qualifications, I also never started learning. So I did courses and trainings and one thing after another, as I could see that my clients got better with my information and my knowledge, and they I needed to update my knowledge constantly in order to get the results that I was dreaming of and aspiring to with my clients, which obviously was to give them my 150%. So I qualified in 1988, and my son was born 3 weeks after I qualified. So I did my second year with a very big tummy. And then I had a little bit of time off, as you do when you're a new mother. And
That
then
must
I
have been really
slowly started.
difficult. That must have been really
Well, it
difficult
was.
with a young child and studying and.
Yeah, no, I was pregnant most of the time that I was studying, so that was okay. And then I gave birth 3 weeks after I qualified. And then I had probably a year off with him as a little baby. And then I gradually started setting up centres for natural health. In my first one was in Solihull, and then I ventured out eventually after a few years to Nuneaton and started working with the doctors in Leonarden Medical Centre. And then I eventually, in 2008, 2006 actually it was, I took on the Well Natural Health Centre in King's Heath and turned that around because that was in need of a lot of, both business-wise and building-wise, in need of a lot of upgrading. Um, so I had in my work, I always had the business side of running, setting up, running, and turning around the natural health centres with several different disciplines of and practitioners. So the business side, which obviously required a lot of mental agility and creativity. But I also had the other side of it, which was more the right brain side of it and the spiritual side of it, which was working with my clients, building my own practice as a natural health consultant. Initially based on acupuncture, but also widening out, as I said, as I added more strings to my bow. I added various things like healing, advanced healing. I learned and worked with the shamans in the Indian Huichol tribe in Mexico. I added art therapy and I added Bowen therapy. I added lots and lots of different things. I probably did 20 years of training
What's art therapy?
altogether. And then art therapy is using the client's own expression within art as in order to do counselling with them. Fascinating. It's really fascinating.
Sounds a bit airy fairy, if you don't mind me saying. So, how were people benefiting from that?
Well, it was probably less airy-fairy than some of the other things that I did because it was getting them to draw how they felt and then looking at their drawing and asking questions and getting them to then tell you what that meant to them, why they had used that color, why they had drawn what they'd drawn, and then slowly you got them to open up and actually express themselves and what was going on with them. However, I have to say that all of these things that I did became tools in my toolbox, if you like. So I had a toolkit with all these therapy forms and all this information. And then as a client came to me, and I have the privilege of working with thousands of clients with very, very good results. As I got better as a practitioner, I got better results. And I would take out the tool that seemed most appropriate to that client for where they were at the time. I would do a very thorough diagnosis and then initial session with them and then, work with them where they were at the time.
So
And initially I worked.
did you have a particular favorite one? What was your most favorite sort of healing stroke strategy that you worked with your clients on?
Well, obviously acupuncture is just a fantastic system of medicine. You you find out a lot about your clients in the acupuncture diagnosis. How these ancient people had that kind of knowledge, I have no idea, but it's just an amazing and very structured way of working with people and healing people. And then, I added things like in 2010, I did a raw food training at Living Light in the States because I found that, people weren't, it doesn't matter if you don't put the right kind of fuel into your engine. Doing servicing with treatments has limited effect. You can imagine if you have a Rolls Royce, the best form of Rolls Royce, or Jaguar, like somebody else wanted me to use the example of Jaguar because he has a Jaguar. If you have the most top finely tuned engine, petrol engine, for instance, or electric car nowadays, and you put diesel in it, it's not going to run however many services you do on it. So it's the same with our body, really. We need to put the right fuel in order to, and I needed to give them the right advice of putting the right fuel in order to get the results that I was looking for. And people would say to me, well, raw food, it's not really, and juicing and stuff, it's not really that nice. How can how do I do it? And so that led me to do a training as a raw food chef, gourmet raw food chef and coach in the States. So I could help my clients better, basically.
Obviously this is more obviously focusing on diet now. So you must actually cringe when you see the modern day diet now that people are largely consuming. And obviously that's one of the reasons why a lot of us are getting ill and getting sick because of what we are putting in our bodies, no doubt. So tell us some of the advantages of this raw food that you used to obviously advocate and be passionate about.
Well, raw food is life in the body. It's juice. It's the juice that gives us life. It's full of all sorts of goodness that helps our cells keep healthy and heal themselves. And it just is what gives you life, really. Because if you cook something, or you freeze it, or you microwave it, particularly, you kill it, and then our cells don't get the same benefit, from the food from the nourishment that you eat, as if you eat things raw. However, there are some people, particularly elderly people, who have been living in a certain way for a long, long time, and you can't just switch them all over straight away to a different way of doing because their body just won't take it. So you have to do things slowly as well.
You're describing
But
my
what I wanted
diet
to
there.
say is that
I said you're describing my diet there, using the microwave, freezing stuff, cooking it. I mean,
no, 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 no.
we say we like eating vegetables, but we cook them to death. We cook them in high oils, high temperature, and okay, yeah, they taste nice by the time we finish with them, but there's very little nutritional benefit in them by the time we finish cooking them.
And I tell you, Zafar, if you knew some of the things that were hidden in our processed foods, you would cringe.
I
Which is
say
not a
I have
thing
a
that I
better
want to do.
diet. I say I have a better diet than most people because I'm not the one. I'm not the. I know someone. You'd be shocked. You of all the people would be shocked. They eat out 3 times a day. On their way into work, they'll probably drop into one of these, don't like mentioning names, but name dropping like Greg's or one of these type of shops and tea, Starbucks, grab something. Then lunch, they're having burgers and chips. And the evening, they have going out as well, eating out. So they very rarely eat at home and they're always eating this processed takeaway food. So when I compare myself to them, I think I've got a good diet. But when I probably compare it to somebody like yourself, you would say you've got a really bad diet, Zafar.
I had a client come to me a number of years ago with MS symptoms, multiple sclerosis symptoms. And when I started questioning him, it turned out that he was eating Chinese takeaway 3 times a week.
Oh,
Can you imagine all that monosodium glutamate that goes into his body? And actually, I just asked him to stop eating those takeaways for a while and see what happened. His symptoms went away completely. So he
really?
didn't have MS that he was diagnosed with. He had MSG poisoning. And there is a lot of poisoning going on in our food, and there's lots of additives and all sorts of things, which kind of leads me to the other things that I wanted to touch on today or talk to you about today. So I clearly worked very closely with people from 0 to 90, the privilege and pleasure of working with thousands of people and getting really kind of deep into what was going on with them. It was fascinating. I absolutely love my work. I have a lot of AccuBabies on my books. I did a lot of helping with pregnant women and deliveries with the treatment that I gave. And I saw with my own eyes not just the effects of medical drugs on people. I saw the effects of the advice that I was giving them in contrast to the drugs that they were taking, and the advice and the treatments that I was giving them. And I've got, I'd like to just mention a couple of examples. One of my favorite examples, which I've used a lot, is I had a 14-year-old, and this isn't just food, this is also lifestyle and experiences. So I had a 14-year-old lad come to me with his mum, because obviously he was underage, so his mum was in on the treatment. And he had severe hay fever. And he'd had this hay fever since he was 2 years old. And so I asked his mum, what happened before he was 2? And it started when he was 2 years old. And I said, things don't just start by themselves. There's usually a reason for why you suddenly get ill. And she said, no, he was a happy baby and everything. And I said, well, think about it, because it could have been something that you weren't aware of that he experienced as a little baby. Think about it, and we can talk about it next time you come. So she came in next week and she said, I think I know what you're talking about. When he was 18 months old, his sister got severely ill. I'd forgotten all about this, she said. She got really ill, and obviously my husband and I had to be in hospital with her for 4 months, best part of 4 months. And my little boy, he was taken care of by grandparents he didn't know. And so I didn't treat him for hay fever, I treated him for shock that was still in his system. And a couple of treatments later, he was off all this medication, and I never heard from him again. He was fine. That was one thing. With cancer and with, we're not supposed to talk too much about cancer politically because we're under strict regulations. But I can tell you now, I've seen a lot more people die from chemotherapy than I have seen die from cancer. The people who generally would work with the cancer naturally and have less chemotherapy or no chemotherapy did much better than the people who went on course after course after course after course of chemotherapy, and that it just killed the cells in their body, killed them slowly.
Fabienne, if I may ask you this, the answer may be obvious. In my own mind, I think I know the answer, but I just want to hear from professionals like yourself. I've seen myself the detrimental effects for the treatments like chemotherapy, radiotherapy, how it makes people even more ill. And many times we see that person's life sort of perhaps being shortened even more with this level of chemicals being pumped into their body. So why, as I said, it maybe seem like an obvious question, do the medical system, NHS in this country, continue to sort of put people through that treatment?
Okay. So the first thing I would say is that some of the treatments are absolutely necessary. You know, if people have got really ill and if they've got thyroid problems or they've got diabetes or something, they've got type 2 diabetes can often be treated very simply with natural means. Excuse me, but type 1 diabetes obviously has to be treated with insulin and things like that. But the secret is, for most people, is to take care of themselves so that they don't get to that point where they are reliant on that medication. So that's the first point. The second point is basically follow the money. You know, the pharmaceutical industry controls the medical training of doctors. They control the politicians. They control the, you know, in Norway we have something called the quack law, which they hide behind, and where you can't uh, access a lot of the really good natural health products because you know they put restrictions on it. And to be honest with you, I think it's really important that we look a little bit at the current and long-term, actually, geopolitical situation that we're in at the moment, which has roots quite far back, actually. You know, we have been, as I'm sure a lot of people know, that we've been brainwashed and we've been controlled for many, many years, thousands of years actually, by a small, initially a small elite of people who wanted to be above God. And if you look at, there's a really good documentary by a guy called Sean Ross, HROSS, called The Swiss Beast, The Home of the Devil, which exposes the hidden dynasties and the octagon group behind the deep state that controls the world government.
Are you saying this happens
These people have
globally
been
for the whole of the world
absolutely.
governments?
Absolutely, we can take them back to the pharaohs of Egypt. They wanted to be the gods, and they had slaves. And when they died, the slaves had to be killed and buried with them. And one thing and another. How do you think they got the pyramids built? You know, they didn't do that themselves. Um,
So,
and
so,
they,
if I may, a lot of people ask that question. So let me ask
yeah,
you to see what your answer is. I know another answer as to how those pyramids were built, but what's your answer?
okay. I have no answer. I don't know how they were built, but they definitely needed a lot of people and had, I don't know, some kind of machinery or some kind of, I don't know. They were quite well advanced, these people, and they always have been ahead of everybody else, and they've hidden a lot of really important information from most of us. And they also, in order to prove that they were above God, you know, they spread out into, particularly into the Western world, and they've been doing some really gruesome things. And we've been all, you know, we've been all brainwashed, we've been blackmailed, we've been, you know, eluded for a long, long time. They activate they kind of made secret networks where people like the Illuminati and the Jesuit order and the Ku Klux Klan and you know all the rest of them, and the Vatican was part of it, now more recently the Bilderberg Group and the World Economic Forum. They built their huge networks to control the world population under the auspice of things like we're too many people in the world and climate change and that kind of thing. They also did a lot of really good things. They made education, they set up educational institutions. Problem was that they controlled what people could learn.
Yes.
And they, like I said, they had slaves. They infiltrated themselves with the mafia, and they became a mafia. And their focus was greed and power, basically. And the other thing that the reason for why I wanted to mention this is because they've been poisoning our food, our water by putting fluoride in it. I mean, fluoride does something to the brain. It is not a good thing, and it really doesn't work on your teeth. It has no effect on the teeth, but it lowers it stops people from asking too many questions. It lowers the IQ on people. This has been proven now. They've been spreading chemtrails, again to poison our food. They want to reduce the world population because they've been stealing from us through our taxes. They got people to pay taxes. And have you ever asked a politician where your tax goes to? It certainly doesn't go to repairing our roads. You can just drive along on the road and see that.
Fabienne, a lot of the things you've mentioned there, obviously there's many things I also sort of subscribe to, and I do believe there's a lot of misinformation out there. We as members of the public and subjects of these governments have been lied to consistently over many things. But at the same time, a lot of this stuff is dismissed as conspiracy theories. And I know that a lot of the theories, a lot of the things which are have manifested today started off as conspiracy theories probably many decades ago. Those people were laughed and ridiculed at as to, don't be silly, this will never happen, this can't happen. But then they have been exonerated of the things which are in place today. Likewise, people today, which are labeled as conspiracy theorists, will also be exonerated at one stage in the future when the things that they are warning about will come to fruition, will materialize as, facts which will be, forced out to play or imposed upon us. And one thing which I want to just touch back upon is the food, how you mentioned about the fluoride in the water. As you can appreciate, it's such a vast subject. We can pick up just one thing out of many and just sit and talk about that alone just for 1 hour. And the thing I want to focus about today is the food. How over the decades, the quality of our food has suffered. And the thing that I want to just mention to yourself before you come in, is the thing that really annoys me is that we have the elite here. You could say, even I was reading once, the royal family, the queen obviously who's passed away now, but when she was alive, you can just say that about the king as well. They have the best diet in the whole country compared to the rest of the population. They drink raw milk from their own sort of Jersey cows. They have their own organic fruits and vegetation grown from their own gardens. Whereas we, the rest of us, I can't go into a shop and buy raw milk. I have to go and find some farmer in some remote rural area who's prepared to sell it, because the shops are forced to sell pasteurized milk to the rest of us. We are sold fruits and vegetables which have been sprayed with pesticides and insecticides and are full of chemicals, and they're not natural, they're not organic. And if you want organic, you have to pay that much extra. So something's gone wrong in our society there, where the elite have access to the best foods, but the masses like us were deprived of it.
Absolutely. And the same with the medical drugs and things. The pharmaceutical industry, just follow the money and you'll see all this. And this is why I was saying to you right at the beginning, don't take my word for anything. Just try and put your conditioning and your belief system aside, do your own research, and you'll figure it out for yourself. You'll find it out for yourself.
This pandemic was an excellent example of how much control, influence the pharmaceutical companies had over the governments, the way these vaccines were pushed. In today's program, we're not here to discuss the pros and cons of the COVID vaccinations or to try and spread any information about them, but we're just going to point out the basics of how this was imposed upon us. I mean, where's my choice? Where's my liberties? Where I should be able to choose if I want to have a vaccine or not. Why is somebody forcing me to take a vaccination? So this is not right either.
Okay, so in order to answer that question, and I totally agree with you. When the pandemic started, I was in Stockholm with my family and looking after my grandchildren, and I heard about this, and initially I just thought, well, a pandemic, what's that? And then I caught the flu, really quite the heavy flu, which I treated with my herbs and my oils and my juicing and fasting and that kind of thing. And yes, it took a little while, and it was quite a heavy flu. I had pneumonia in the process, but I got over it. And then they started talking about vaccinations, and I thought, yes, that's what it's all about. I want to go back first before I go on to the next thing that I was going to say to you. Is I want to go back to when I lived in Leamington and I was an acupuncture student and a new practitioner. I lived in obviously the acupuncture college was there, so it was a very sort of open-minded alternative community there. And my son was a baby, and the health visitor came and put her foot in the door when he was asleep and said, why haven't you vaccinated him? And I said, well, hang on a minute, he's been awake for hours and he's just gone to sleep. Can we talk about this another time? No, I want to talk about it now, and really quite bullyish, really. And my son, when I looked into it and found out what ingredients they put into these vaccines, I decided that he wasn't going to have them. However, I hadn't yet found a homeopath which I would use for very small children for him that was good enough to be able to trust. So he ended up, after a couple of years, he ended up having a couple of doses of the tetanus and the diphtheria vaccinations. And I think he had the polio vaccination as well. But, all the others, he just never had. So he had no vaccinations at all until he was an adult. We just worked through these things that he got, the colds and the childhood illnesses and that kind of thing. And we, he was just at home and he was loved, and we gave him good nutrition and we looked after him and used natural methods. And after a while, I found a really good homeopath, and that was the end of that. She was brilliant. So every time he had something wrong with him, I would take him to a homeopath, and he'd just get better by himself. So that's the one thing I wanted to say. And also I worked with, I don't know if you remember Dr. Mark Payne,
Nope.
who wrote for the Birmingham Post for decades. He was a medical doctor, but he was also really into environmental medicine. And he had the surgery in Cheswick Green where I set up my initial natural health centre. He and I kind of did that together. So he would tell me, that, for instance, about antibiotics when he was called out at night to families with small children. He would suggest he was also a trained homeopath, and he would suggest using homeopathy for them. But a lot of them, they wanted to go to work in the morning, and they wanted their children to be better now, you know. They didn't have time to give the child to actually their body to just regenerate their health. So they would keep calling him back out every time until he gave him antibiotics. And he said, well, this is against my vet's judgment. I don't think your child is going to get better with antibiotics. I think you need to look at different ways of allowing them to heal themselves and build their immune system. So, you know, I've seen this trend a long time ago, but I want to sidestep a little bit and look at the financial system, the central bank system that these people that we talked about earlier set up. And the reason for why I want to do that is because they have built a system based on debt creation, creating debt. They set up these central banks that took control of the finances. And I remember I worked a number of years ago. I wanted to have a corporate experience because I'd been running my own business for many years, and I hadn't really had been working corporately at all. So I worked with an agency for a couple of years, and I worked in the Rothschilds in Birmingham, in the reception there. And whilst I was working there, whilst it was quiet, I researched a little bit about their history. I didn't really know a lot about the Rothschilds at the time. I had no history of them, but what I read was that Mayor Rothschild had 5 sons, and he sent them out to all the different big cities in the world, you know, and one of them was sent to Paris, one was sent to Frankfurt, one was sent to London, and that was Nathan Rothschild, to set up central bank systems to take control of the world finances. And Nathan Rothschild, you know, he was sent to London, and and they would
What year
work
was that?
together. This family. Oh, I don't know. It was in 1700s
Okay.
something or other. And they would work together, these brothers, and they would create and finance both sides of all wars. So the Napoleon War at that time, and later on the First World War and the Second World War, were financed by different arms of this family, this banking dynasty that they created. And at one point in the Napoleon Wars, the one side was financed by the English banks, and the other side was financed by the brother in France. And of course, they then had full control over the outcome of the war. So Nathan Rothschild, he set up a bet amongst all the wealthy people in London of who would win the Napoleon War. He knew full well because he had full control of it, and he guided people as to the fact that Napoleon would win. And all these people, you know, he had a high standing. This guy in the London finance situation. They believed him, so they went in on the stock market based on his advice, and of course it was turned the other way around, so they all lost, and he then went in and took over the whole London Stock Exchange. And he said something like, you know, I can care less who is in government as long as I control the printing of money. And that's why they set up these central banks, in order to take control of printing of money. And by taking control of printing of money and creating a lot of debt, you know, that's how they made their money. And you can imagine, the more debt they create, the more money they need to print. And then there comes a point where there isn't enough gold to support this printing of money. So the printing of the money is actually printed out of thin air, and so on and so forth. So this system can't continue.
Yep.
And when they get to a point, which they have done several times in history, where the banks are about to go down, they create a catastrophe of some kind, like a war or a COVID or something or other, to divert people's attention to in a different direction. And that is the background for a lot of this stuff that's been going on for hundreds of years. However, this time they've been found out. And this time there is actually a huge military operation going on to take this sick system down.
So what are you saying, that people are waking up?
Well, a lot of people are waking up. A lot of intelligent people are waking up. But we all need to wake up. And the reason for why this has been allowed to go on for so long, can you imagine, is because we have been all asleep. We've been just, getting around with our own doings and being busy working, and we've
You mentioned how sometimes a war is orchestrated to divert people's attention. But this day and age, it doesn't need a war to be orchestrated to divert our attention. You just need Netflix. You need a new series of Love Island. You need a new drama on TV. You've got the internet. You've got your PlayStation. You've got the World Cup tournament. You've got this tournament. You've got whatever entertainment that has been created. Such a prolific amount of entertainment just to keep us busy, engaged, and be busy doing useless things.
I know, exactly. So when the COVID pandemic came along, I just thought, hang on a minute, what is going on here? And certainly when they started to talk about mass vaccinating people, I just thought, this is what it is. And there we go. So that's a little bit of background for what is happening in the world and what we really need to wake up to, because we've been sleepwalking and most people have been sleepwalking for a long time, to the point where they're not willing to or
they don't want to wake up.
They don't want to wake up. It's too comfortable.
Exactly. You've hit the nail on the head, which is what I mentioned earlier. They're so busy, engaged in this useless, futile entertainment, that they are very comfortable. They don't want to face the reality. And secondly, there are those who, as you said, one of the systems of control is debt. Once you sort of trap people into debt, then they are so busy working, trying to get themselves out of that debt or trying to service that debt to keep the payments up, that they haven't got time to lift their head and to see for sure what is happening in society, what is their government doing in their name, because they're like that hamster on the wheel.
But, ignorance may be bliss, but it is not the way we move forward in the way we are supposed to be here. We are supposed to be here to spiritualize the earth, to bring soul to the earth, to contribute. It's not about what I can get, it's about what I can give, So really that brings us back to the third point that I wanted to talk about, which is how do we get back to, and which is what you've been asking as well, is how do we get back to and sustain vibrant health in this mad, crazy world?
Very important. Yes, please tell us.
Absolutely. So one of the greatest misconceptions and illusions that we've been brainwashed with is that natural ways of living and healing don't stand up to science, and that is just nonsense. There's plenty of research out there. There's plenty of evidence that natural ways work to build an immune system really well, and that our body is a fantastic mechanism given the right kind of nutrients and the right kind of lifestyle and the right kind of spiritual, impressions and the right kind of, goodness, that your body has an amazing ability to heal from all sorts of things. And my life's work has, like I told you before, largely been to educate people as to find out how they got to the point where they came to seek my help, and how they can reverse that and how they can avoid getting there again. So, so I've been focusing a lot on not just food, but also lifestyle, attitude, and how you can, both the body and the mind and the soul and the spirit. So what I would say are some really simple, simple ideas, really, of how we can start to turn this around. Is to start doing some research for ourselves in how we've been conned for lifetimes, and start to stand up and say, look, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not taking, their word for it anymore. And most people eat. When you're talking about food, most people eat not just the wrong food, but they eat far too much. Because when you eat the wrong food, the body doesn't get the nutrients that it needs. So that's where raw food comes in. Because if you cleanse your system, if you do juicing and herbal cleansing and all the stuff that I've been doing for years and years and years, your digestive system becomes clear and you can absorb the nutrients from your food much better. And so that's one way of doing it: fasting, intermittent fasting, juice cleansing with herbs and with organic fruits and vegetables. Amazing.
Can I just interrupt you just for one moment?
And that kind of thing.
So, sorry, please continue, but just wanted to mention that, we were taught this 1400 years ago by our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, that fast regularly. We have a whole month in the year dedicated to fasting. And the beloved Prophet, peace be upon him, used to fast as a regular practice every Monday and every Thursday. This is documented in the biography of their life, because every aspect of their life and facet has been documented. They used to fast every Monday and every Thursday. And a few points which I just want to mention, which they mentioned to us, as I said, over 1400 years ago, are so relevant and beneficial for me and you today and everybody else, is number one, firstly, eat pure, organic, proper foods, right? Number two, only eat when you are hungry, right? We sometimes think, all right, I've got to have 3 meals a day, irrespective of whether I'm hungry or not hungry. We're conditioned to have 3 meals a day. They've said that only eat when you feel the extreme pangs of hunger. And even when you sit down to eat, stop eating while you are still hungry, because that feeling of fullness comes later, right?
20 minutes later or something, half an hour. Yeah.
Also, it's just so interesting and fascinating that this health advice was shared over 1400 years ago, that only eat enough to keep your back straight, basically to make sure that you're just giving enough fuel for your body so you can physically keep going. But if you cannot resist, you're one of those greedy people like me, you like eating, you eat 1/3 food, keep 1/3 space in your stomach for water, and leave 1/3 space for air. Okay, that's for people who want to indulge, they cannot resist. But what's happening now is people eat to their heart's content, fill their stomach with food, then they're like, gargle the water down, right, on top, which is probably floating on the windpipe at the top. And then they've got no space left for air. And on top of that, the worst thing is
Exactly.
we're not even eating the right foods anyway.
I know.
So,
And
so
the, and
what
the
what do
thing
you
is,
think
when
of
you
what do you
eat,
think of that advice from 1400 years ago?
I think that's perfect. And also, they used to use gourds. Gourds? Are they called gourds? The ones that you make rattles with. They used to use gourds to make an enema kit and cleanse their colon regularly. So
Okay,
that and the thing is that when you eat a lot of the things that we eat today, like wheat and complex carbohydrates,
rice.
and rice, pasteurized milk. It's all just it just clogs your system up.
Yeah.
So the more it makes you feel full and I suppose sleepy and comfortable. So that's the sleepwalking bit again. But it coats the inside of your digestive tract all the way down with this glue. I mean, flour and water. What does it make? It makes glue,
Oh,
doesn't it?
imagine that
If
with.
you mix flour and water, we used to make paper mache with it. Did you do that when you were a kid?
I eat a
So
lot
if
of
you
that,
eat,
unfortunately. I eat a lot of, we call chapatis, made of flour. And I know it causes
it's
that bloatiness. It's making a lot
no,
of
it's
people
crazy,
ill, fat. So I myself probably
crazy.
need to, have a complete wholesale review of my own diet, hopefully
Yeah,
soon. And I'm trying to change things. And perhaps one of the days we can
yeah.
call you on, especially just to talk about diets, recipes, what foods not to eat, which foods to look at. I'd be interested to get you on board to discuss that in a bit more detail sometime in the future.
Mm. Absolutely, and I keep things really simple. So when you hear me talk about those things, you'll go, what? Why am I listening to this? This is really simple and elementary. Because I went through all the kind of glorious raw food training and gourmet, and that's all very nice. But then you come to a point where you come back to actually, yes, you know how to make those things really, because food has to have the P vitamin in it, and the P vitamin is for perfect pleasure. It does have to have the P vitamin in it. It has to taste delicious for us to get the full
See,
enjoyment out of our food.
see,
But
that's the problem.
you
Most of the
think food
things
is
that
so
taste
simple.
delicious, most of the things that taste delicious are the wrong types of food, like the sugary,
Not
chocolatey snacks.
not as you begin to change, your taste buds will follow your change. So your taste buds will automatically begin to. Your body will say, when you start to cleanse your system and you start to get the nutrients in your body goes, yeah, this is what I want. This is what I've been wanting all the time. So you actually start to crave things that aren't full of sugar, aren't full of wheat, aren't full of pasteurized cream, dairy products, all that kind of stuff that just rots in our body and creates mucoid plaque and clogs up our system. So yeah, it's just taking the first steps, including doing a detox, is really important. And I wanted to say that, mad as it is, having talked about all these gruesome and horrible, people eating people and cannibals and drug trafficking and human trafficking and all the rest of it, which is absolutely terrible. Mad as it is, this is actually an amazing, it's probably one of the most amazing times in history to be alive. We are so lucky to be here now, and we have got an opportunity to wake up and to live, to shift over. from this path that we've been going on, which is like the conditioned belief system path, to shift over to the golden path where we actually have so much pleasure in life,
I agree with
and
you.
where we
I
are
agree.
awake and fully aware.
Main
And
thing is we are still alive, and this is the time for us not only to change ourselves but also to question our contribution for the rest of mankind, because I'm a great believer
absolutely,
where we've been taught we have been sent on earth for a purpose, to fulfill a purpose, and one of the
absolutely,
purposes is of our creation is to benefit the rest of mankind. We haven't just come here to eat, sleep,
exactly.
drink, go to work, make money, come back, enjoy yourself, and repeat that cycle again and again. And hopefully, this conversation, at a more deeper level will continue with yourselves. And we're nearing to
Mm.
an hour of this chat, and I'm conscious of time. And no doubt,
I just wanted to. Am I allowed to read something that I read to
yes,
you the other
yes,
day,
yes, yes,
just to
please.
finish off? Because I think
Yeah,
that would just finish it off beautifully.
go on, please do.
So I wanted to read something to you that I wrote a number of years ago, and it's called "Inner Peace: Who We Truly Are."
Okay.
When we connect with a vast universal silence and peace that exists within us, we can begin to remember who we truly are. It is time for love, even if it causes disruption. It is time for truth, even if it hurts or feels uncomfortable. It is time to allow the new in and trust, even if it scares the living daylight out of you. It is time for love. Stop fighting amongst the religions and come back to love. Our everyday should be filled with more joy than grief, more friendliness, mutual understanding, and real productivity than stress, more unconditional positive regard and understanding than unreasonable demands, more pure goodness than commercial untruths, more encouragement to fly than elbowing aside or crushing down of our soul's quiet yet insistent inner voice, more love than hate. In everyday life, we need a structure that works both for us and for the whole. Busyness is good, but stress eats ourselves. Be a trend leader who spreads goodness in every aspect of life. Think, therefore, with your heart, my lovies, and feel with your gut, and then use your brain in service of both.
Wow. You know, we need to go back to spreading love. There's far more hate in the world. And yes, there is a lot of
Absolutely.
darkness out there, but there is also light, the light that will dispel that darkness. Fabienne, it's been absolute pleasure having you on our program today. And as I've mentioned before, without doubt, we'll be inviting you again to educate us even more, especially in the arena of healthy eating, because this is something which I am most passionate about going forwards, because I feel myself can benefit from this personally, and many people that I know, because our diets are quite poor. We think sometimes we're under an illusion that we have good diets, but the fact is we don't. I mean, I met somebody the other day, just in conclusion. They said, "Oh, I have a great diet. I only eat grilled chicken every single day." I said, "Okay, but how was that chicken processed and manufactured? It's probably had so much chemicals pumped into it. It's been manufactured in a factory, industrial scale. So the chicken that you're eating, yes, it's good, it's grilled, it's not fried, but the chicken itself is a problem." And for him, it was a revelation. So we need to educate people. That's why this program is called The Art of Living, because we're going to be creating different facets of living in terms of healthy living, spirituality, mental health. So let's talk and revisit this area again. Once again, thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to having you on again in the future.
It's been a pleasure, and I'd love to come on again.
Thank you so much. All
Thank
the best. Bye bye.